Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of Urban Strategy in the Present Tense, a webinar series powered by the Lindy Institute for Urban Innovation at Drexel University. My name is Andrew Zitzer. I'm an associate professor at Drexel's Antoinette Westphal College of Media Arts and Design, where I direct the Urban Strategy graduate program. If you like what you hear today, consider looking into the Urban Strategy program. We have a limited number of $25,000 Urban Innovation Scholarships available still for the fall 2024 upcoming year. So I'll say more about Urban Strategy once we've had our conversation, but I just wanted to let you know that there's some exciting things on the way for the program. This afternoon, I'm excited to speak with Cass Green and Nia Eubanks-Dixon about their work with Philadelphia Black and Brown youth and teens. We're here today to talk about Philly Youth Futures, practices, policies, and pathways. I want to be intentional in connecting this title of our program today, Philly Youth Futures, with the name of the webinar series, Urban Strategy in the Present Tense. I would like to link and build a bridge between the present and thinking about the present tense with the future and future thinking in our urban youth. It's important and necessary for us to focus on the present and to be present for our youth as a pathway to the future. So let me introduce our two amazing guests. Cass Green is an activist, artist, grassroots organizer, and community leader. She's dedicated her life to building capacity from within, uplifting diverse voices, and building community power across Philadelphia. She co-founded Mill Creek Community Partnership, led community engagement at People's Emergency Center, and spearheaded innovation and safety initiatives in Kensington. The last 2 years, she's been working in the district attorney's office, doing juvenile diversion and restorative justice work, along with the Data Lab and the 57 Blocks Project, which we heard a little bit about on our last program. She is a fighter and committed to representing our 10th district in West Philly and Logan Square and bringing the village voice to Harrisburg to demand access to resources and investment to not only survive, but to thrive. Welcome, Cass. And I'd like to also welcome Nia Eubanks-Dixon, who's the founder and creator of Creative Praxis, which focuses on arts-infused, healing-informed, and anti-racist trainings, which emerged from over 20 years of research and experience working with diverse communities worldwide. Nia is dedicated to the craft of interactive transformational facilitation by providing young people, educators, and community members with intentional time for healing, learning, growth, and action. Nia is a seasoned facilitator, trainer, counselor, professional dancer, and storyteller, teacher, and therapeutic restorative community artist. She is certified in life coaching, crisis intervention, the dialogic process, restorative practices, interactive mediation, restorative arts, trauma healing, trauma-informed spaces, and de-escalation techniques. In 2002, Nia received her BFA in dance education from University of the Arts. In 2017, she received her master's degree in urban studies with a community arts concentration from Eastern University. Each year, Nia trains thousands of people, both locally and globally. She has worked with American Friends Service Committee, Philadelphia Parks and Recreation, the Harmony Project, the Aspen Institute, Jobs for the Future, and Urban Bushwomen. Welcome, Nia. So to begin, I'll start our conversation with our guests and then open up the floor and reserve the final 10 minutes for questions from the audiences. As we go, for everyone attending, please don't hesitate to share your comments and questions in the chat. To start, I think it would be good to hear a little bit about what motivated you to step into this calling of working with young people. But maybe before we jump into that conversation, I'd like to ask you if you'd consider starting us off this afternoon with an invocation or a blessing to help set the tone and intention for our conversation. Cass and Nia, can you please offer us an invocation for the youth of Philadelphia and the region?
Nia, please start.
Yes, so as we start this conversation, I am wanting to look upon and call upon all of the beautiful young people of Philadelphia, the beautiful young people of Camden, of Jersey, of Chicago, of Detroit, of all the young people around the United States and around the world, to their contributions that they have made to making this world a better place. I am always reflecting on the fact how old Martin Luther King was when he started. And we forget and we look at him now as he was an adult, but he was really a young person. And so for all the young people who are standing, who are fighting, who are loving on their communities, we speak in honor of them. We speak in those who are continuing to fight and continuing to struggle. We speak in honor of them. We speak in honor of the parents and teachers and educators and community organizers who are on the front lines, who are standing with our children, standing with our young people. We speak in honor of them. And to those that have come before us, that have worked to make this place a better place, we speak in remembrance of them, that we one day too will be the shoulders that the next generation will stand on, and hope that we will be worthy of that task to do this work.
Thank you, Nia.
Thank you, Nia. I'd like to speak to the mind, body, spirit, and pull up our ancestors who actually, many of them, as Nia mentioned, when we think about the civil rights movement and Dr. King and all of those children who put their lives on the line to promote change and to get a new path forward, that I would like to open up a spirit of possibilities for our children, our youth, our community, our parents, our providers, all agencies that can come together in that spirit of being on one accord, that they do matter, our youth do matter, our communities do matter, the future does matter. But just as we invoke those spirits into the future, we need them for today, and that the power of possibilities is still existing in our communities, and it's for them. Thinking about the children in Africa that got liberation for us. So I hope that this time and this spirit of invocation will bring that to their remembrance. And it's not just a story that we tell, but it's a reality that they can embrace and hold on to. And we can do that collectively through mind, body, spirit, and grace, in bringing our ancestors along with us.
Thank you, Cass. That's beautifully said, both of you. I love that we are starting off by setting an intention for this conversation, an intention of mind, body, spirit, an intention of calling on remembrance and activism and upholding young people and the contributions they can make. So just to offer us some background on both of you, thinking about your work with young people, is there a moment that really grounded you in this work? Can you talk about what motivated you to step into your purpose doing this work?
I'll go first. I thought about this question, and for me, there's not really like one specific moment. There just been like these beautiful moments throughout, my early teens, my 20s, and my 30s, that each time these moments happened, that I was like, yo, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. So I can think about like one time we was at District 1199C, and we were running a summer program with young people. They were 9th and 10th graders, and we were building community with them. And so we had this like impromptu open mic, and it was like 35, 40 young people in this small room. And we had been working with them so far, maybe like 3 weeks. And we were really starting to build community. And these young people, they got up, and some of them sang, some of them rapped, some of them got up and just spoke from the heart. Some of the young people cried, they spoke affirmation. We started talking about politics. And literally in the span of like 3 hours, I saw these young people be vulnerable. I saw them talk life. I saw them ask hard questions and grappling. In that 3 hours, we were in there building solutions. One young person ran out the room and got flip chart paper and started writing like strategy. And I knew in that one of those were the moments that I knew like this is what I'm meant to do, to hold this space, to create space for young people to connect, create space for young people to learn, for young people to heal, and for young people to have a time where they can plan and create strategy for themselves, for their peers and for the community. So when I think about that moment particularly, but moments like it, that's like, yo, this is what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to not only work with young people, but also be with people who work with young people to support them.
That's a powerful story. Cass, how about you?
I mean, as Nia mentioned, I have a number of situations or instances, but what really comes to mind is growing up. I'm originally from Newark, New Jersey, and I'm coming from Newark during right after the riots, right? And growing up there and being a youth that was pretty unsure of themselves and gravitating toward towards things that were not in my best interest, and feeling like I didn't really have a lot of safe places to land in to help move me through that process, right? Of being a teenager and then finding myself and learning about life through a safe space. And so when I came to Philadelphia, after many years, working at Penn, and then I finally got invited to this small church, actually over in Belmont. It was called the Church Down the Way. And I went there and I walked into the building, and it was this pastor who became my mentor, Curtis Wellington, who was in the room with mostly children and young, teenagers. And he was praying with them, and he was telling them that they had access to hope, that, their access didn't mean that they had to come through anyone, that they could have a personal, intimate relationship with God and their creator. And I remember thinking like, wow, I wish I had had someone to speak that over me during my years of growing up in Newark, when I was really trying to find myself and wanted to get second chances and things of that nature. And I remember thinking, wow, like I said, I wish I had known that and someone had spoke that into me, and that I wanted to be a part of people and places and things that would do that. And that's really what led me in this direction, outside of having children of my own and always trying to make my house be the kid house where things happened and children were safe. But I became involved in this incredible small ministry that did this great work, and eventually started Mill Creek Community Partnership and Find Right Through Our Eyes. But really that's what changed my whole trajectory about how I could be a part of the process opposed to being a bystander.
That's very powerful. I wonder what, for youth that are facing trauma, injustice, day-to-day hardships, even just uncertainty, as you said, Cass, how do we help instill hope and help them envision better futures? What role specifically can art, storytelling, and the creative approach play? And I'll let Nia start that off, since I know you do a lot of arts-based work.
Yeah. So I think for me, like, one of the reasons why we started Creative Praxis, which is an arts-based healing center training organization, is because the power of the arts, the power of play and creativity. So I think one of the major things that we forget about the arts and we forget about play is that it allows us to not only see what is there, right? But when you're playing, you're using your imagination. When you're creating art, it allows you to expand yourself to see the possibility of what could be. And that in of itself is the spark of hope. It's allowing ourselves to see what's here, but then moving past that and creating the world that we want to see. And what the arts do is it allows you to do that. Every time you're putting, paint to paper, every time you're using your body to tell a story, it gives you the space to open up to see the possibility. And so when we open up spaces for young people to explore the arts, to be in places of play, I mean, I think play is so integral to healing, so integral to fostering hope for those reasons. It also, what hope does and what play does, play and the arts do, is that it really reduces the fight, flight, freeze response, and really brings about dopamine and all those pleasure and joy hormones that are going on in our bodies, which our young people need access to. So when I think of the arts and I think of play and creativity, it's essential to allowing us to see where we are and to tell the truth about where we are, but it also gives an avenue for young people to see and start to create the possibility of what could be, and for them to be the drivers of that narrative. And that's what play does, that's what the arts do. And the last thing I'll say, that why the arts is so important, is that the arts connect us, right? It allows us to come together and really connect to one another, to listen to one another, to see each other in a way that we may not be able to see each other in the day-to-day life.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. And I wonder, Nia, in your work, before we go to Cass, do you ever find that young people resist the arts-based approach? Are they closed off, or
No,
do they open themselves up to it?
never. That is one. So people ask me all the time. This is one of the things that people ask at Creative Praxis, like the adults, because we'll come into a space and I don't know these young people. Usually when we do trainings with them on healing, or we're working, like Cass and I did a lot of work with the diversion with the district attorney's office. And people will ask, like, how are you building community so fast with these young people, where these young people are open and receptive and they're being vulnerable with each other in ways that we haven't seen? I'm going to tell you hands down, it is the arts. Because what the arts do is it allows young people first to connect to their story in meaningful ways. It allows them to have a safe space to share, because I'm not sharing like, oh, I am Nia. I'm saying, hey, look at my art. And my art is a representation of me. And therefore, there's a pathway for me to share. So in the beginning, like maybe the first 20 minutes of a session, young people are kind of like, but when you open that space for creativity, when you open that space for young people to explore, I have seen, you would be surprised what I have seen with young people. And a lot of people, when you first see, you know, especially a young person who has a lot of trauma, they might seem resistant. Give it an hour. Give it 45 minutes and you are going to watch the magical transformation of the arts. It's really sad that we don't have the arts centered in all of our education, all of our schools, all of our after school programs, because it is amazing the transformative power that it has.
Cass, do you want to add anything from your experience?
Yeah, I mean, agreeing with Nia, of course, and also like, our youth are able to use, art is communication, right? So what they may not feel comfortable articulating through words, they can articulate through art. And also when we provide safe spaces for that to happen, there's no judgment, right? I know that a lot of times working in schools and volunteering and doing art programs, in neighborhoods and at rec centers, a lot of times what has to happen too is the freedom that comes with the creative expression through the arts is that it just takes that minute, because they've been trained and almost programmed. Like when we start early childhood education, we're taught to color in the lines and kind of like restrain and not mix colors and things like that. But when you open up the plethora of artistic expression for young people, you may get something. So, it could be a collage, it could be a painting, it could manifest in so many different ways that when they speak it out through their artistic practice, they're even surprised and empowered that that came out of them, and that story is being told through their, artistic expression. So, I mean, I think it's something that we also have to work at to kind of reinvigorate, so that we can get out of those boxes that we kind of get trapped into or programmed into when we start our education system experience, right? Because that's what we're kind of taught, is to bring it in, or it needs to look like a masterpiece. When I worked in a contemporary art museum for many years, knowing that creative expression can have many types of forms, and it can be in different disciplines. So I mean, I think that is super valuable, and it's a way to communicate not just with the children, but also it can provide an outlet and communication between young adults, children, and older adults. So it really has intergenerational properties that is very useful to how we communicate and engage with community.
Can I add one thing? I just want to say one thing about that, because I think that's an interesting question. I think the people who are most apprehensive about it are adults. It's never the
Absolutely.
children. It's sometimes when I work with a lot of teachers, they're more apprehensive and it takes them a little longer. I think because exactly what Cass has said, like we've been conditioned to be like, once you get to a certain age, there's no more play, there's no more artistic expression, there's no more creativity or discovery. And so I think it takes the adults to come out of their uncomfortability to be able to open the space for young people to do what they're closer. Young people are closer to that ability to create, to expand. They don't have as many boxes yet as we have. So I think when the question just needs to be for us is like, how do we walk into our own artistic practice so that we can open up the space for young people to do what they know is intrinsically our human need, which is of expression.
Mhm. And I think that there's a tendency among adults to think that some people are artists and other people are non-artists. And what we have to do, as you all said, is tap into our innate creativity that's part of our human flourishing and our kind of creative right to exist and to express ourselves, which is so different from the idea that like there's a trained artist and then everyone else has to stay away from that work because they don't have the masterpiece in them, as Cass was saying.
Mhm.
When everybody basically there, what you express and what you put out there, it's your masterpiece. So you own that, right? So I think that's what I get so excited about, particularly working with youth and the arts, is they are always creating a masterpiece, whether it's a black apple with a purple leaf coming out of it. It is their masterpiece.
So I want to talk about how that moves young people into talking about healing and restoration, because I think that that's an important goal. It's not art for art's sake, right? It's art for the sake of moving them into a conversation, moving them into a space of expression, moving them into a space of discovery, as Nia was saying. So I wanted to ask about how both of your work takes creative and grounded approaches that are rooted in healing and restoration. So what are some examples of these practices making a tangible difference in a life trajectory for a young person? And I'll address that first to Cass and maybe some of the work that you've done with restorative practices.
Well, I mean, we started fine art through our eyes as a place where youth could enter in a community that didn't have well, actually, it was in a place that was no longer offering art classes. So, it was just based for community youth. And it was kind of like a catchment space where youth didn't come there knowing what they were going to be involved in. But what I found was having resources to other artists coming from the museum, like because I worked at Institute of Contemporary Art for many years, bringing those resources into that space where our youth also got to meet other artists and practitioners that look like them. So that actually was an amazing time for us over at Mill Creek Art and Cultural Center because we had people like Rick Lowe, Terry Atkins, great artists coming to our neighborhood and not only working with our youth in collage and paint and multidiscipline art practices, but they also actually got to work with other artists and practitioners who look like them. And I think that that was a really powerful opportunity for them to be healing because they actually got to see themselves in a space that they would grow into. So I think that that's really great opportunities for our youth. We took the art programs into our local and neighborhood schools. And I think we'll talk about that a little later, where there weren't any art programs. So we provided those art activities and other activities into the schools because the teachers needed that in their environment, but there wasn't budgeting available to have those accesses to those healing mechanisms. So, I mean, it's interestingly enough, many of the youth that I taught and helped start fine art through our eyes back in 2025 are still a part of my community. They're in their 30s now. A number of them have their own companies where they're now teaching art. They're now teaching filmmaking. They're now doing the same work that we did. So basically what happened was for us in terms of healing and learning and succession, they have now the torch that we pass, and they're doing that same work in our communities to do that same healing, teaching, learning, and sharing, which I'm super, super proud of.
So what I'm hearing you saying, Cass, is that representation matters in part. By having Terry Atkins and Rick Lowe come in, they're seeing possibility models of places they can go with their own creativity, and having people who look like them and maybe have similar shared life experiences can help see a future path where they can become the teacher, they can become the sculptor, they can become the community-based artist.
And they can also become the giver, right? They participate in the giving. I don't want to leave out Mr. Vaughn Stubbs, who helped us start Fine Art Through Our Eyes, but these people like invoke that, not just artistic healing practice into our youth in our community, but they also like empowered them to know that they could become the teachers themselves, right? They didn't have to wait. They were able to teach and own that space for themselves so that the healings can take place between themselves. So that's a part of Fine Art Through Our Eyes curriculum, is that we do literacy, we do hands-on activities, but most importantly, whatever you learn there, you can take it with you and teach it to someone else.
Nia, I know that trauma-informed practice and healing is an important part of what you offer through creative praxis. So do you want to speak a little bit to that question too, about healing and how we show up for young people in those ways?
Yeah, so for me, I think, first of all, thank you, Cass, for that. I think for me, it's a two-pronged approach. The one part of it is, how do we support our educators, our parents, those people who are on the front lines of change, whether it's, nonprofits or, out of school time providers who are doing this work, or how do we make sure that they have the proper training so that they can be in their own restoration? They have time for self-reflection. They have time to learn about what it means to set up trauma-informed and healing-centered classrooms where young people feel safe, where they learn about restorative practice, which is rooted in building community and how do we repair harm when harm has been caused. So first, making sure that we set the tone and we set the space for young people to enter into. And so how do we do that? We make sure that those people who work with youth have what they need, especially as it pertains to, like, how do we create healing spaces? How do we center self-regulation? How do we center co-regulation? How do we really build authentic community? And then I think the next thing is that then having young people and having educators and having parents and community leaders who feel comfortable that they know how to do that, then be able to open up the space for young people to also be able to experience what it means to have healing practice, what it means to be restorative in our approach. And, you talk about, what are some tangible impacts that I have experienced as a result of that. I think one of the things is that teachers and parents really feeling like, I have the tools and I have the capability to do this, and I feel confident and I'm doing it. I know how to address conflict. I know how to build community. I know how to repair harm. And it's one of the things that's been so beautiful is watching educators play and like build healing spaces for young people and the impact that that had. Like, we had this one person, we did a training in Kensington, and they were talking about how the young people like trashed the bathroom. So we were talking about, like, how do we set up even our bathroom spaces to be healing? So we did this mock, space where they actually created the bathroom. He tried it. He came back and he was like, oh my gosh, we had this retreat with young people. There were like 40 young people. And because the space was so intentionally set up, the rag that you hang over, like when you rub your hands, they put one of those rags on there, and it was in pristine condition when we left. No one put things on the walls. Like, it was beautiful. So he didn't realize something so small, like being intentional about setting that space, the impact that it would have, that young people respected the space, that they respected him. So I think the impact of it on the educators level is there, but also when young people have an opportunity to um, be in places that are intentionally trauma informed, that are intentionally restorative, meaning that we're not just going to kick you out when things happen, but we're going to work with you through this journey. We're going to help you to look at your self-regulation and co-regulation tools. We're going to support you in understanding how do you repair harm when harm has been caused? How do we hold each other accountable? And that, I mean, the impact of that is enormous. Young people being able to get jobs and cultivate relationships, and building a net that works for them and their community.
Yeah, I mean, I also, I would like to also add, like, in terms of our youth, like working in intergenerational classrooms and projects such as that. Like a project we did with St. Ignatius Nursing Home was working with youth who were in fifth and sixth grade, and they came to the nursing home never seeing some people who were that of that age or that had those type of physical disabilities, and being really taken aback. But throughout the project, a number of them, they did a quilt and other projects, but the children like became so compassionate and so caring, and you saw this transformation where they became even the seniors like eyes in their ears and their hands, and they learned their history. So I think just that space of power with our youth through the arts is really, it could be utilized more than what we do, and these opportunities to do that would be even more greater to help heal our communities as a whole, and our children and our adults.
Yeah, Cass, I'm so glad that you brought up that word power. Because I think when we think about trauma-informed spaces, we don't connect trauma-informed and healing-centered spaces to that word power. And that's really at the core of it. What it is about power, bringing power back into their bodies, bringing power back into their communities, bringing power back to their families. So having that space, that's what it at the core of restorative practice and trauma-informed spaces. It's really about how do we cultivate that sense of power, power within, power with, and power to. So thank you for highlighting that word, 'cause I think that's really powerful as we think about Philadelphia future and Philadelphia present. It's about, cultivating spaces of power.
I couldn't agree more. And I wanted to sort of play devil's advocate for a minute and say, I feel like terms like trauma informed and restorative justice are getting thrown around a lot these days. And I'm just curious if how we know when it's the real thing. Is it about that power shift and bringing power back into the people and the young people and the intergenerational spaces? Like, how do we know when someone's just selling trauma-informed practice versus when you're doing it with integrity and you're doing it with heart?
I'm gonna let you. I'm gonna let you answer that, Nia, because we work together a lot. So yeah, no, I'm gonna let you answer that one. Start that out. You'll know though. Yeah.
I mean, first of all, it's not my place to judge anyone and what they're doing. But I will say that first of all of it is an explicit practice. So this isn't something that you say, it's something that you live. It's something that when creative praxis talks about ethos, right? You can go to a training and learn about, oh, this is what it means to be trauma informed. No, trauma informed is how you come to know yourself, how you come to look at the people around you, the healing practice that you're doing in your own life, and how are you opening up the space for other people to open up healing pathways for themselves. So usually when I go to a lot of like trauma informed and restorative practice trainings or workshops or people who are in it, it's very vocabulary focused. It's very, steeped in, the definition and the terms, and it's not rooted in practice. So I think one of the things that for me helped me to know is when I see people up and doing, when it's somatic, when people are in their bodies, when the people who are training it and sharing it with the community are people who've studied it, who breathe it, who understand its power. And it's not a buzzword, it's a life word. It's a word that is rooted in liberation. Um, and so I think that's how, for me, I can distinguish between when we're just throwing this word out because we want to have grants and everyone's talking about it. It's like when people were saying anti-racism or diversity, equity, and inclusion. These aren't just words. These are practices that embody us, that we live in. And so for me, it's like, I want to see how, you know, how are you walking in this practice, first of all? And then when people are with you, are you guiding them with tools and practices and strategies to help them? And I think the last thing I'll say is that it isn't a punitive, like, we got to fix these people, right? That's another thing I think that makes it different, is when you really understand, yo, me too. Me too. Like, we're all working through our stuff. And I'm not here to fix you. I'm not here to change you. I'm here to walk with you, because life is real. And I think that's the difference, is when you see people walking alongside people in their healing journey, when you see people in conflict and you're working with them to build community, not for them and not to them, but with them. Don't even get me started on it, but that's all I got.
I meant to get you started on it. Thank you. Cass, were you going to say anything?
Yeah, I mean, I just would, I don't think I need to say much to add on to what Nia said, but I think you also can see it, especially with youth and teens and young adults. It's because you'll be able to tell by their response to us, right? And how they will grow and transition through that process, right? That space of safety, so that they can feel comfortable to embrace whatever healing they may need and how they interact with each other and themselves, and think about whatever the topic of maybe the activity or whatever it is. You'll start to know how authentic their healing time is going to happen, because they'll exhibit it in front of you, and I've seen it happen, and it's just an amazing miracle right before your eyes, after they find trust and safety, and that they have freedom to do and be themselves. You'll see it through their actions and through how they will keep returning to you, and that'll let you know that the trauma is starting to change and the healing has begun.
We got a great question in the Q&A, and I want to read it out and ask if you have some thoughts about it. It says, as with many things, carving out the time for these activities is a huge challenge. Any tips on finding the time in a K-8 public elementary school?
Activities, for this person who wrote, when you say activities, are you talking about like healing centered practices, art-based play?
I think that's what they mean, because that's when the question came in when you were talking about that.
Yeah, so for me,
she says art-based activities, yeah.
Yeah, so for me, I think the core of it is integration, as opposed to putting it aside. One of the things that we do at CP is just integrate it inside. So for example, if we're talking about, we want young people to get to know each other at the beginning of the class, right? So one of the things that we do at Creative Praxis is we do like an I am, and young people take about 10 minutes at the beginning to, with paper, and there's different art materials around them, and they answer the prompt like, I am blank. And so taking those 10 minutes, and then we turn and we face each other. So there's many different ways that we do it. Sometimes in morning circle, because I used to teach that grade, we would start off with movement. And movement that was with affirmation. So every morning when young people, even if it's 3 minutes, we would start off with, I taught middle school, and so we did peace, love, respect. And every morning we started off with, I said your peace. Yeah, I said your peace. Yeah. And so that brought in the arts, it brought in vocalization, it brought in power into them. So being really intentional about how we bring that in. And even something like when you talk about math concepts or in English or social studies, and you're learning about something, to ask young people questions like, yo, where do you feel that in your body? You know, if you were to think about what that must have been like, and it was a picture, what would that picture look like? And having young people get up. So there's ways that we can integrate it. It doesn't have to be, I think, the way that we've made it in education, where it's like arts is here and education is here. And I think the core of it is, how do we marry those two worlds together to blend them, because they're so complementary to each other, and it allows young people to even remember the material more. So sometimes when I'm teaching social studies or science, quick example, I was teaching my daughter cells, and we got up and we did it, and we put it in our bodies and we drew it out. And our teacher called me and was like, this is the best science quiz she ever took. And he said, while she was doing it, she was doing these gestures. And what she was doing is her body was remembering the knowledge. And if she could put it in her body, she couldn't remember it. She aced that test. So I think it's just how we integrate the arts into everything that we're doing and not making it separate. I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's great. And I know, coming from, my wife is an educator in the public school system. And I think, you know, when it comes to that and the restorative practices, it's not just a question of finding the time to do it outside of the curriculum, but finding the time to do it inside of the curriculum. So when conflict arises, it's healed and not just shunted off to the side and treated as like a disciplinary problem, but it's an opportunity to bring the class community together and grow.
Yeah, and I think with that, like, you know, if we intentionally are building community, right? If we talk about restorative practice, the first arm of restorative practice is building community. So if we build community, then when harm happens, we have something to repair because we've built the community. But if community hasn't been built, there's nothing to repair. But if we spend that time, then when harm has been caused, there's something that we can meld back to or mend back to.
I want to shift for a minute and talk about the impression that the public has of young people and the impression that the media gives of young people. We talked about this earlier when we were doing our prep call. And, you know, I think both of you expressed real concern about the state of the image of our young people in our society. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the role that media plays, the role that narratives and stories play, and how some of the work that you're doing and the young people you work with are changing the narratives.
Yeah, I mean, I believe that, you know, in this day and time, you know, especially over the last few years, there's a sense of fear. You know, the community is basically fearful of our youth, and they're feeling that energy. And I think I picked that up even deeper working at the district attorney's office with the juvenile diversion department. And Nia could speak to this also. Like, as we went out in community and went on field trips and things of that nature, seeing how field trips and just walking down the street, how people responded to our youth, like as a sense of fear, and how concerning that was, right? That that's that energy that's being put forth on them, and then sometimes they're responding back with that same energy that they're receiving, and being super concerned about how that narrative is. We kind of are blaming our children for all of, you know, the trauma and the situations that they're going through, when some of it feels like it's being induced by outside entities onto them, and they're just carrying that with them and how they're operating and moving through life. And I believe that the media, different genres of music, things that they have access to, have started to promote those behaviors where they're kind of like just responding to a culture that's kind of preempted them to get to that space. And being super concerned about how does it feel to even be further traumatized as you walk around not carrying your own trauma and issues, but then you're picking up other people's traumas and issues as you're walking through and navigating through life, right? And we really need to have some authentic, real conversations. And how they are being perceived, how they are being accepted, how are they not being accepted, so that we can get to the root of trying to change that narrative about they aren't these almost like criminals that are just walking around space all the time and don't deserve any respect or grace or consideration in terms of what's being put out on them.
Yeah, I mean, I always think about, and those of you who are on the call, I like things, we're going to do some audience participation, even though it's Zoom, right? So when you think of, ba, 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 who is that? That's McDonald's. Give me a break, give me a break, break me off a piece of that. You know the words, right? You can put it in the chat. You know the words. Kit Kat bar. So these messages are being ingrained in us in subtle ways, in subconscious ways, and very conscious ways. And so what narratives do is narratives help us to shape our belief systems, our attitudes, our behaviors. Narratives, impact how we look at other people, but the real detriment to narratives is also how we come to know ourselves and how we come to know the people that are in our own community. And so if the narratives, and this isn't like something that's new, right? If we look at the narratives of America, right, is what has the narratives been around Black and brown people in this country? What has the narratives been around youth, all youth? If we think back to how youth were portrayed, in the early 1920s and 30s and 40s, like the ways that young people were portrayed. And then we're just seeing a greater manifestation of that now, right? How, when a young person is shot or when something happens, be very intentional about the messaging that you're hearing. And if we're not keen on that message, and if we're not, aware of it, those subconscious ideologies are coming into us and really shaping the way that we see young people, how we treat them. There was this, this well-meaning educator, loved them to pieces, great, great person. And there was a conflict that broke out in the classroom between two students. And it wasn't big. They were just debating a math problem. And he got frustrated and he yelled out, "Shut up!" Right? And I could hear him screaming. So I, run down, pull the teacher out. We're debating it. And I was like, it's interesting. You've worked at a lot of schools. You worked at this other, it was a private school. And I was like, have they ever debated? And he was like, yeah, they've debated. Have they had these deep discussions about math problems? Yeah. And I was like, but have you ever yelled at the top of your lungs, "Shut up"? And he thought about it and he said, no. And I was like, so where did that behavior come from? Where did you learn that it was okay for you to yell at those Black babies in that classroom? Where did you learn that? And I think that's the issue with narrative change. And for me, I think it's really important as we begin to, those of you who are on the call, is to really open up spaces for narrative change work. How do we begin to lift up pathways to change the narrative, to open up the spaces for young people to share those stories, to tell the truth about lies that have been told that perpetuate narratives. And that's hurtful sometimes when you hear something about yourself that's like, oh, but it's not true. So to open up more spaces for young people, and then also to create spaces for young people to create narratives that speak to their truth, their power, and to have more outlets. And also like to hold people accountable. When you hear music or you see something on the radio, write to your, your local stations and be like, yo, that's not okay for you to call that. You have nonprofit leaders. Stop calling young people at risk. Like these are all narratives that we keep repeating. Juveniles. What does a juvenile mean? Like we got to be mindful of the narratives that we say. You calling somebody, disabled. What does that word mean? So I think us really being intentional about that is going to be key.
We got another great question in the chat that said, also, in addition to the narrative shift, how can we highlight the importance of mentorship with young people?
Yeah, I mean, Cass and I just, when we were working together with the youth diversion, with the district attorney's office, unanimously, one of the things that young people said that they wanted was more mentorship. Um, and, there's an old African saying that it takes a village to raise a community. And so I think how we open up those spaces is it has to start on an individual level, right? Where it can't just be I, me, my youth, my teens, right? My family. It has to be our youth, our teens. And so opening up more spaces for all of us who are on this call to work with young people that, maybe don't have access to, parents or access to, heavy mentorship. And I think, in schools and rec centers and after school programs, I just think that has to be an integral part of opening up more pathways for young people to have access to caring, consistent, positive adults. That is a part of the trauma-informed, healing-centered approach, is that young people need caring, consistent, positive adults. If you look at elephants, like when an elephant has been injured, right? I don't know if people on the call have ever looked at elephants. One elephant will be injured and all of the women elephants will surround that elephant until that elephant is healed, until that elephant is made whole. And then they'll begin to open it up. So wrapping our arms around our children is going to be really imperative. Thank you for bringing that up. Cass, what you think?
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I think sometimes we are so busy in our own lives that we can't figure out how to find space. But, it could be like the simplest thing. It doesn't always have to be a plan. It doesn't always have to be planned and programmed out. It could be very simple and organic to be that mentor for a young person or a child. And I think the main thing that they really appreciate is consistency. That's what they need to be able to open up and put their trust in and their belief in, so that they can process through whatever traumas and whatever they have going on as they, process through their teens or young adulthood, or even smaller children, that they need that consistency that we can offer, if it's nothing more than a phone call or meeting them, at a park or something like that. That it's not as complicated. Sometimes people think of mentorship being this really programmatic thing that you have to have so crystallized that you know what you're doing. It's just being who you are and being that parent that's innately in all of us, right? And that's how we can really serve our youth in a more comprehensive way through mentorship. But they all ask for it, and they do all receive it. And the thing about it is, I think what's really interesting is you'll know who's your child because they'll gravitate towards you.
Cass, we got another question from the audience that said they noted Cass is running for state representative in West Philadelphia. And they said, what can elected officials do to help promote art as a tool to help young people? So I'm going to tee that up to you first, Cass.
Okay, so first of all, right? Investment, right? Investment in the arts, primarily in schools, daycare centers, rec centers, and just, supporting folks who are doing the work. You have so many artists who are working already in our community and spending their own money and finding their own resources to do the work that they do. So I just want to lift them up in this space right now, because we see you, we acknowledge you. We just need more investment and opportunities for you to find your own path, so that you're not always, again, we know that people need numbers and we need to be accountable, but we can't always take our time away from the work that we're doing and practicing. And I identify as an artist also, or a placekeeper, is to do that, do the application and check the boxes when we're trying to do the creative work on the ground in the community. So I believe as elected officials that we can convene our art makers, our people who are teaching, and find ways that we can do comprehensive, like ways to support our schools, our community, our resource centers, and get money down into the hands of the people doing the work on a day-to-day basis. And try to work to say that that money that's sitting in these different areas up in Harrisburg, like, can we get a move on that and not take another 5 or 10 years to release those funds into our education system? Can we make that a priority and make it urgent so that we can get that happening sooner than later?
Thank you, Cass. Nia, anything to add?
No, wonderful.
All right, I'm going to ask one last question. This is a little more personal. It's that, all three of us are parents. And so on a personal level, are there ways that being a parent has deepened your ability to work with young people?
Yes.
Yeah. They're all, I mean, I'll just say, I have 2 children I birthed, but like I say, I have hundreds of children. Like, they're all our babies, right? They're all our babies. And, we feel love for them. We feel care for them. We want the best future for them. We want them to come into themselves. And I think, like, for different generations, as with any mother or father, right? We want our children to not have to go through everything we went through. We want to offer them more. And we also want to, I think about it a lot. I say that I'm a preservationist, but I also believe in succession. But I want to offer them something better so that they don't have to take their time to build as much, that they can walk into things that are already in place, and then they can take it and grow it from there, right? Those opportunities, like, not always handing them something that's broken. We need to find ways to offer them things that are already in the process so that they could take it and just run with it. So that's what I would want for my children. And that's what I want for all of our children. I want us to find a way to just give them, when the torch is passed, that is not a torch that doesn't have, like, fuel or doesn't have a wick. I want it to have everything it needs to get it and take it to the next level. So they're not always starting behind the start line, but they're at least at the start line, or they already started the race and then they can move it forward. So that's what I want for our children.
I mean, I think I started working with young people when I was 19, and I had my first child when I was 28. I think Indigo is 15 now. And I think one of the things that having children has done for me, first of all, it's just heightened my love for youth, heightened my love for our children and our babies. And I think the other thing that it's done for me as a parent, as creative praxis does trainings on healing and restorative practice and de-escalation, is I think what solidified it for me is that these aren't tools that I needed for outside of my community, that it had to start home first. And so what my children have taught me, like when we talk about boundaries, and I hear there was a teacher who grabbed my son by the arm and kind of told him to come here. And my son dropped the arm and said, do you see this arm? This is not your arm. This is mine, all mine. And the teacher was kind of like, she called me and she was like, first of all, that's powerful. Where did he learn that? And, in conversations with my son, he was like, I have boundaries, and was able to articulate what his boundaries were. And as a mom, that's just like, wow, like I'm not only able to teach this outside in the outside world, but I'm able to teach this on the inside world with my own immediate children, and them getting to see me live in that practice and them living in that practice and them watching me do this work out in community. So I think for me, it's like a two-prong. It's like what I'm doing out in the community matters and what I'm doing in home matters, and how do I bring those two worlds together? And my children also check me. So if it's corny, if it's not right, if I'm self-centered, like children, my children will let me know, mommy, get it together. You are out here talking about self-care, but you need your self-care. So I think that's the other thing that my children have done to help strengthen me as a human being.
I also like to piggyback on that. Like, well, my daughters are definitely older, but like my youngest daughter, I actually look at her. I say like she's my advisor, right? And that I look at them and I say, wow, these are some really powerful. Like people look at my children, they say, oh my goodness, they are like super powerful women. But I wanted them to be those women, so they always had a voice. I always tried to give them the truth, no matter what, and to see how they like manifest and move through space and power like super excites me. But the children that I mentored are like literally the same way. And so they, people will come back and tell me, they'll say, I can tell that they spent time with you or they work with you or whatever, because I always wanted them to know that they didn't have to wait till they grew up to be people, that they were people when they were young. They were people when they were 5. They were always people. So they needed to know that they had a voice, they had their own perspective on things. And even if they needed to be disciplined or something, I still needed to hear them out because they were, in fact, human beings and people. And they didn't have to wait till they got a certain age to invoke that space, right, or that power. So,
Yeah, that's powerful.
Well, that's beautifully said, both of you. Thank you so much. And Cass Green and Nia Eubanks-Dixon, I want to thank you so much for your time and for sharing your important stories and experiences.
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you for the
So,
opportunity.
absolutely, anytime. And so this is just an example of the kind of things we talk about in the Urban Strategy Graduate Program at Drexel. So if you're interested, we'd love to have a conversation. You can email me. My email is awz25@drexel.edu. And my website, Hazel maybe can put it in the chat. We do have these limited number of Lindy Institute Urban Innovation Scholarships available for the fall. So do reach out about that. And finally, Urban Strategy in the Present Tense is produced by the Lindy Institute for Urban Innovation at Drexel University in partnership with the Urban Strategy Master's Program. I've been your host, Andrew Zitzer, and special thanks to our producer, Thomas Devaney, and to our production director, Hazel DeKito. So thank you for everyone for joining us, and it's been such a pleasure to have this beautiful conversation. Have a wonderful evening.